The South is the birthplace of the very best in American music. Rock, country, R&B, gospel, hip-hop, jazz, bluegrass, and the blues. The soundtrack of the South echoes from the mountains to the sea and crosses all genres of the American musical experience. The Southern Chord podcast is on a mission to collect engaging conversations with those musicians, vocalists, songwriters, and producers who have crafted the most compelling lyrics and melodies from the American South. Every artist, every song has a story, and the Southern Chord is committed to capturing these uniquely human tales of the creative process. Those stories of people who love music enough to make it and share it with audiences all across the South and beyond. This is the Southern Chord, conversations from the soundtrack of the South. And here's your guide for this musical journey, Tony Bauman.
Welcome in to the Southern Chord podcast, conversations from the soundtrack of the South. I'm Tony Bauman. Thank you for checking back in with us. Yes, I've been sidelined for a couple of weeks. Real life intrudes when you're trying to fit a podcast into a regular day job. But nonetheless, here we are. We're back, and we're back with a very special guest. It was in March of 1989 that 21-year-old Texan by the name of Sammy Sadler was breaking on to the music scene. His big break was just about to unfold for him. He had just had a breakout hit with a remake of the classic Aaron Neville, Tell It Like It Is, and he was riding high in Music City. And he was walking along Music Row that night in 1989 along with Kevin Hughes, who's the chart director for Cashbox Magazine, one of the industry publications that charted the ups and downs of music across all genres. And, well, as fate would have it, Mr. Hughes was gunned down right there on Music Row in Nashville. And Sammy was injured. He took a bullet, and that's a bullet he still carries with him, as a matter of fact. And that tale, that tragic tale, has been referred to as Murder on Music Row. But I like the idea of our conversation this day being Murder and Redemption on Music Row. So my guest on this edition of the Southern Chord podcast, Sammy Sadler. Sammy, thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here because you have such an amazing story, and it's an amazing story of survival. And but I want to, before we jump into that, I want to go back even before that fateful day back in 1989. What took a boy from Texas to Music City to chase his dreams? How did that happen for you, Sammy?
Well, man, I grew up loving music, but I was also an avid sports guy. So, in the early years of my life, I've always loved music. My mom and dad said when I was 2 years old, I'd pull myself up to the stereo that they had and just, listen to the music and dance along. And so I guess God really always put music in me, and I guess that started from an early age.
Now, when you said you're a sports guy, now you're from Texas, and Texas football is a religion in and of itself. Did you play Texas football?
Well, I played high school football, and
high school football, man, that's the way the religion is. Friday Night Lights.
Yeah, so I was involved in all that, but I really excelled in baseball.
Yeah,
and I was a pitcher, and I had colleges looking at me when I was a sophomore in high school, and I was just, at that point in time in my life, man. I ate, drank, slept baseball.
Yeah.
And even though I played football, basketball, and tennis, and the other things, I really excelled in baseball, and that's what I was really consumed with.
Now, how did the music bug bite you?
As most of us, a lot of us in the entertainment business, we put high school bands together. We're played in high school bands, and that's kind of where it started with me. And then we went around and started doing a bunch of the Opries across Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana, and I ended up playing a Louisiana hayride twice and being invited there. And so that's kind of where it all started. And as I got in high school and all of that, I had to make a decision when I graduated. Was I going to play ball or was I going to play music? And I asked my parents, they said, well, whatever you decide, we're going to back you and we're going to be behind you. And so I chose music over sports, and that's what led me to Nashville.
Now, was country always your genre, or were you one of these guys that you'd play pretty much anything that was in front of you?
Well, country's what I always played. But, man, I was an Elvis freak when I was a kid, and man, when he died, I probably cried for 2 days, and I just loved Elvis. But as I got older, I started listening to Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard and Marty Robbins and all those guys, and that's kind of where it all began.
All right, now let's talk about that fateful move to Nashville. Then, I mean, you're at that crossroads. You're out of high school. You've decided you're not going to chase the baseball dreams. How do you decide to make that trek east to the Music City, which is a dog-eat-dog world?
Well, like I said, my parents supported me, and my mom moved up to Nashville with me when I first moved to Nashville. She stayed there for a few months and a while with me, and just right out of high school, and I got a record deal within 6 to 8 months. Really? After moving there. And, back then, not only majors, but independents. I mean, the music business is built on independence. And, a lot of people that's come off independence have gone on to have major careers and major deals. And, we started there, and that's where we started. And then, from 84 to 89 is whenever we had our records, and back then, in those days, they wouldn't put out albums on you. They put out singles, right, to kind of see how they would fare and see how they did. So from 85 to 89, I had 6 nationally charted singles, and then, like you mentioned, Tell It Like It Is was my fastest rising single. That's the one that took off for me, and they were rushing me in to work on the album. And then March 9th, was a fateful night that happened to us with me and Kevin getting shot.
And I definitely want to talk about that, because that is the compelling story behind your book, A Hit with a Bullet, a true story of corruption, greed, and the real murder on Music Row. And that keyword real. So I definitely want to talk about that a little bit. But what was that first taste of success like for you? Because Nashville is not an easy city to get any kind of attention, because thousands of people go up there with guitars slung off of their back and with their dreams in their eyes. But it's how many folks go to Nashville and come home with their tails tucked between their legs?
Many.
Yeah.
Many.
So,
and that's the, there's a lot of people out there, whether it's country music or whatever genre
right.
it is, the music business in a whole, what happened to Kevin and I, is not just about country music. It happens in all genres.
Oh,
yeah. It was, for me, I mean, I thought I was just from a little bitty country town in Texas, man, about 1,300 people. And I thought, man, if you can sing, you can go to Nashville and get a deal, and, things work off your talent. But little did I know, with all of the things that happened to us and the murder on Music Row, did I find out that talent really doesn't play any part in it.
Well, it's got to play a little bit, right?
Well, it might play a little, but very, very little.
Really?
It's all money and politics.
Well, you were coming, but you were attempting to make your life in Nashville in that 85 to 89 period, when some of the biggest names, now legendary names in country music, owned that city. The Reba McEntires, the George Straits, he had already left by then, but Leon Everett was sitting in, so you were moving in the same space as people who are now a part of the American lexicon of music. How much interaction did you have with those folks at that time, who now are legendary figures in country music?
Well, that happened to me in 89. So when that happened to me, I left Nashville and moved back home. Really? To Texas, to recuperate, because that night I didn't know how bad I was hurt, when the shooting happened to us. And, later on that when I'd recovered and woke up in the hospital, that I'd known that, I was shot. I had a bullet still lodged in me, still carry it with me today. But it had severed the main artery in my arm, and I was bleeding to death and really didn't know anything about that. Mm-hmm. They had to take an artery out of my leg and graft into my shoulder, and if that hadn't happened, they'd had to cut my arm off.
Well, let's take it back to that night. And again, it was March 9th, right?
March 9th, yes.
March 9th, 1989. Leading up to that, getting together with a friend, Kevin Hughes, who, again, was the chart director at Cashbox Magazine, which was, head-to-head, back and forth with Billboard trying to own the chart industry.
Yeah.
What were you doing leading up to that? I mean, what was that day? Do you recall what that day was like for Sammy Sadler before that life-changing experience?
Well, I mean, it's just a normal day, for me. I mean, it was a Thursday, and, the charts come out on Friday. Right. So, anybody that knew Kevin knew that he worked on Thursdays and worked getting the charts compiled and getting ready. But I didn't have a clue that I was even going to see Kevin that day or that night. Me and my wife, I was married at the time, me and her had gotten in an argument, and I just wanted to get out of the house and get away, and I picked up the phone to call down to Cashbox, and I didn't know, the phone just rang. I didn't think anybody was there, and I started to take the phone away from my ear, and I thought I heard somebody say hello, and I pulled the phone back up, and it was Kevin, and I said, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" And he said, "Man, I'm just sitting here working on the charts." I said, "Well, if you're going to be there a while, I'll come down and see you." And he said, "Yeah, just come on down. I'll leave the door open for you." So I went down, and when I went in, Kevin was on the telephone, and so I grabbed a magazine and waited till he got off the phone. And when he got off, I said, "Man, you want to go grab something to eat?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, you want to go in my truck or go in your car?" He said, "Let's just grab my car and we'll go." So we left, went down on West End. I think we went to Captain D's and ate that night.
Okay.
And on the way back, we decided to stop at my record company's office, Evergreen, to use the telephone. Back then, we didn't have cell phones or anything like that. So we stopped in, and, Kevin and I had been friends for about 7-8 months probably, and I feel like if time would have went on, this hadn't happened to us, would have been lifelong friends. Sometimes you meet people and you just have that connection, and so we stopped and got on the phone, and Kevin, he got on the phone, said hello to my mom and dad, and was talking to them, and they'd never met him yet, but I wanted to introduce him to them, and he got on there and talked for a little bit, and then he gave me back the phone, and he sat back down on the couch, and when he did, we heard something rattle the front door, and I said, "Man, what was that?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, "I'll go look." So he walked out front, and he looked out through the out glass, looking out on Music Row, and he come back in, sat down, and I said, "What was it?" He said, "I'm really not sure." He said, it looked, might have been a black guy walking down the street. He said, "I really couldn't tell because of the lighting." And so I told my family, I said, "Hey, we're going to get off of here, and, I'll give you guys a call later or tomorrow." And we got off, we went back out, we walked in front of the office out there, we looked around, didn't see anything. We walked out on the front porch, looked around, we didn't see anything, and him and I started walking about across 16th Avenue to get in his car, and we was kind of laughing, joking, cutting up a little bit, and I walked in front of his car and opened the door and sat down and started to reach for the door, and I thought I caught something moving out of the corner of my eye, and I looked up, and the guy was just right on top of me, and all I saw was a gun, and I said, "Oh my God, this guy's got a gun." I threw my arms up to cover my head, and that's when he shot me in the arm, and I fell over into Kevin's car. They said Kevin did a barrel roll, started running back up 16th Avenue. I heard shots, but I didn't know what had happened or if Kevin had gotten shot or what, and then they had told me later that the guy had shot, missed him, hit him in the back, and when Kevin fell, he stood over him, shot him twice in the back of the head, and run off.
It was an execution-style killing, and it was an orchestrated hit.
That's what it ended up turning out to be, and that's what we found out later.
But initially, you're just thinking this is a foiled robbery or something like that?
Well, we didn't know. We didn't know what it was. We just know that we got shot, but we didn't know anything about it. I had no clue of what it was all about until it came out.
Now, you... immediately after that, I would assume you're rushed to the hospital and you're starting the recovery process.
Well, that night, like I said, I didn't know how bad I was hurt. There was a guy, saw my feet moving out of Kevin's car because my feet were dangling out of the car. And there was a guy in an apartment building that saw my feet moving, and he called out, "Hey, do you need some help?" And I heard that, and I ran up to this guy's apartment. I didn't even know I'd run up 3 flights of steps and collapsed in the guy's apartment. He's the one that called the ambulance, and then they took me down and loaded me up and took me to Vanderbilt.
You're hit. You're carrying a .38 caliber slug, and you're running up a step, following a guy trying to get help.
Well, yeah, and I didn't even know what I was shot with. I didn't know it was a 38.
But nonetheless, you're
yeah,
shot, and yet those survival instincts are kicking in at that moment.
Yeah, I just heard, hey, you need some help, and they said I run up to this guy's apartment, and it ended up being up 3 flights of steps and collapsed in his apartment.
I've never been shot, but that I can't even begin to imagine what's going through your mind at that point, whether you're confronting your own mortality or are you even aware of how bad, and you're riding high because you've got Tell It Like It Is on the charts.
Yeah, like I said, that was my fastest rising single, but that whole night, my whole career ended that night.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we'll talk. I tell you what I want to do. I want to take a pause right here. I want to play Tell It Like It Is, but this is a remastered version, right?
It is. We went in. My latest album that's out right now is titled 1989.
Oh wow!
And so we went back to that era and cut some #1 records from '89, and we recut Tell It Like It Is that I had out, and it's on the new album.
Well, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to play this record for our listeners. This is a remastered version of Sammy Sadler performing the classic Aaron Neville tune, Tell It Like It Is. This is off of an album called 1989. I want to talk about, the reason is obvious, but I want to talk about why in the world would you name your comeback album 1989? But we'll talk about that. I want to play Tell It Like It Is. This is Sammy Sadler off the CD 1989 on the Southern Chord podcast. Tell It Like It Is, Sammy Sadler off of 1989. Wow. And I got to count the Aaron Neville version of that among my favorite songs of all time. Got to be among my top 10 favorite songs. So that's awesome. I'm glad that you chose that as one of the records that you recorded on 1989. And again, that was a breakout hit for you. It was the fastest rising chart record for you. Beyond the obvious reasons, why in the world name this album that is kind of your reemergence onto the music scene 1989? Well, a lot of people would just want to forget that.
Well, the thing about it is, Tony, that's always going to be with me. The murder on Music Row, I didn't choose to get shot. Kevin didn't choose to get shot and murdered and killed. But it's a part of me, and everybody wants to talk to me about it and wants to know about it, and only God knows why one lives and one dies. Kevin doesn't have a voice anymore. I'm here to not only speak for myself, but to speak for Kevin, because I believe Kevin would still want me chasing and chasing my dream, and that's what I'm doing. And I'm here to talk for Kevin. Again, he doesn't have a voice. My story's still being written, and I'm thankful for that. And I'm here to let people know, the Cashbox murder, whatever they want to call it, the murder on Music Row. Kevin, to my knowledge, I'd only known him 7 or 8 months, but he was an honest guy. And this man died for being honest. I feel like I took a bullet for country music. When things happen in the music industry, they rally around their own. Nobody rallied around us. Nobody rallied to come to our defense. And that hurts me, because Kevin Hughes, in my eyes and in my mind, what I knew was an honest guy. And here I am, I get shot, brought into something, a part of something that I have no idea what this is about, what's going on with all this, and I get treated like a suspect, and the police treat me that way, and it hurts me, and it hurts me today because of it. And I just want people to know I'm not here to badmouth Nashville or the music industry. I went to Nashville to be a part of the music industry just like everyone else, to make my mark, but kind of Nashville made its mark on me. But I'm still here. I'm thankful to still be here, chasing a dream that God gave me so long ago.
1989. So I guess in a lot of ways, it's an appropriate title, because 1989 had to be kind of a year of the loss of innocence, I would say, for Sammy Sadler, because not only did you take a bullet that you're actually still carrying, but in a lot of ways, maybe any sort of idealism that you had and any illusion that you had about the purity of the music industry had to pretty much die that night along with Kevin Hughes.
You know, it really did. And like I said, I mean, I didn't learn till years later what all this was about and what all had happened and what all was involved in and how careers are really made. You know, I was a young, naive kid. I was 21. Kevin was 24 when this happened. And, you know, Kevin and I both went to Nashville with that dream of being in the music business, me as a singer, but he loved how the charts worked. He loved where those chart numbers came from and how they charted. And you know, so I learned a little bit about Kevin from that end, and there's no telling where he could have been in his career. He could have been the head of Billboard magazine for all I know. But he loved country music. He loved where the charts go and how those things work. And but that era, why I wanted to go back and cut songs from that era, I think, to me, the 80s and early 90s is some of the best country music that was made.
Well, you're actually playing with some pretty heavy hitters on this particular record as well. I mean, you've got, for example, one of the tracks on here, Church on the Cumberland Road, you're featuring Marty Raybon on that particular record. Bluest Eyes in Texas, Larry Stewart on that one. And Darlene with the great Tony Graham Brown on that particular record. And so in a way, this record has to kind of be for you, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it has to kind of be you kind of trying to recapture that was taken from you on that March night in 1989.
Well, you know,
and to reconnect with that audience that you never really had a chance to cultivate.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my career, as I told you, you know, it came to a complete halt that night. And so, you know, I hadn't had the opportunity to have the radio success that other guys have had, you know, and with the Murder on Music Row, the content of it, and it being payola and a scandal, it's kind of put a cloud over my career. But, you know, they can't take my voice from me. I'm here. I'm going to keep doing what I do. You know, people say, well, you know, why hadn't you quit the music business? Well, you don't understand an entertainer. It's a fire inside you. And, you know, we connect with the fans, and we connect with people, and we're entertainers. And it's just something that is hard to explain, how an entertainer feels and what they get when they get out there on the stage and they get in front of that audience.
But the music world has changed so much since 1989, too. You are in this age of social media and the immediacy of digital media. You are effectively able to connect with your new audience in a way that you never could have in 1989. You've got the opportunity to reach people that you could not have reached with the traditional music business structure in 89.
Well, you know, it's true. I mean, we're in the computer age, you know, and so social media does help us and help independent guys that don't have major record labels be able to get to that audience and, you know, and spread that word, and those people can spread it to their friends. And so it does. We're in a different age to where you really don't have to have a record deal, I don't think, anymore, to get your music out there and get it heard.
2019, you set out to set the record straight about that fateful night in March of 1989, and you came out with a book called A Hit with a Bullet. And as we said, it's called The True Story of Corruption, Greed, and the Real Murder on Music Row. What prompted you to want to tell this story? I mean, that's no small book. You cover this thing.
Well, you know, everything happens in God's time, and you know, people ask me, you know, everybody wants to talk to me about it wherever I go, you know, and it just came about at this time and point in life in my time that we ended up writing the book and getting it out. And, you know, I just wanted to tell my story through my eyes. Again, I'm not here to badmouth Nashville. I'm not here. I love Nashville. I've got friends in Nashville. I'm just here telling a story of what I lived through and what I've experienced.
Well, and see, because the entertainment industry is what the entertainment industry is, it's 90% image and 90%, you know, trying to avoid the bad press or whatever it is. And, you know, a lot of people will look at this and go, it's just another tell-all book about what sets this book apart about what you're trying to get forward with a Hit with a Bullet?
Well, I mean, obviously it tells about my life, where I've come from when I was a kid, and my journey to Nashville, and talks about the country, the history of country music. Then it goes into the murder, and then we're kind of where we are today. But, careers are not made just on talent. And that's what I'm saying, is that the public out here doesn't know that there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that why people have careers.
I've not read this book. I'm just getting my hands on a copy of it today, but I'm looking forward to it because I'm so fascinated about the behind the scenes stuff. I grew up watching The Wizard of Oz, and I always thought it was so cool that the wizard was just a normal guy standing behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And the reality is the music industry, the filmmaking industry, the television industry, there are worker bees behind the scene that don't get to share the spotlight. They don't get to be the ones signing the autographs in the alley. They're out there getting the job done. And you were a guy out there from Texas chasing your dream in Nashville. You were in the city where dreams come true, and it's all just sort of shut down in the blink of an eye over corruption, over greed, over just the dirty, ugly, dark side of the music industry. It affected your well-being. It put your life on the precipice that the dark, evil side of the entertainment industry.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I feel like people look at me different because I was involved in something so corrupt, and Kevin and I didn't know anything about it. And if, when he found out about it, or he knew that this was going on, I believe that's why these guys did what they did and had done to him what was done to him, because it ended up being a hit.
It's a tragic thing that happened to you. How has this changed you for the better? Has this affected you in a way that is actually a redemptive chapter in your life?
Well, it's changed my life, obviously, in a lot of good ways and a lot of bad ways. When I was a kid and growing up, I was kind of a class clown and joked around with everybody, and tried to make everybody laugh. But now I take life very serious because I know how quick it can be taken from you. And, the night that all that happened to me, I had an out-of-body experience. I floated up out of my body.
Really? I
watched them operate on me. I saw my mom, my stepsister. They weren't nowhere even around. I mean, they were in Texas. So, at that time, I didn't know it. But Kevin, I'd found out, was a Christian, and I wasn't that night. And God left me and took Kevin, and I'm just so thankful that he thought enough of me to leave me and save me. And now I can say I'm a Christian. Now I know God, and I'm just so thankful that he thought enough of me to keep me.
We're sitting here in a church, and the camera is framed with a cross over your left shoulder. And we're sitting in a church where you effectively gave your testimony this morning about how this experience changed your life. And you found Christ after this.
I did.
You didn't let this moment of tragedy, you didn't let this thing that effectively ended your music career for a period of time, you didn't let it push you away from your faith. It ultimately drew you back to your faith.
Well, my dad took me as a little kid to a Pentecostal church for about 3 years. And I had that distilled in me as a young kid. But as we all, when you grow up and you go through college or you go through high school or whatever, you kind of get away from that. And, you go out and you're drinking, you're chasing the girls, and you just living life, But God's always pulling at you at some point in time. And God's going to do whatever he's got to do to get your attention. He's just sitting there waiting on us, and he's waiting on us to come to him. And, a lot of times we don't listen to that voice, and we don't listen to that. And, God will do whatever he's got to do to get your attention.
I was sitting in the back of this church, as a matter of fact, today, and you sang a song that was titled Thank God. And you reference that night in March of 1989 in that song. Talk to me a little bit about that particular song. It's an autobiographical song, perhaps even, certainly more so than the 8 songs that are on this 1989 record. Talk to me about that song when you are standing up there and you're looking out at a congregation and you're talking about that night when your life literally flashed before your eyes. Take us inside that song as a creator, as a songwriter, as a performer.
We were recording an album called Heart Shaped Like Texas, and Jerry Cupid was my producer at the time, and he said, "Man, we need to write a song about what happened to you." And we were right in the middle of the album, and we'd taken a break and was in there in the console room, and he mentioned that to me, and we just started writing right then, and I was flying back to Texas the next day, and Jerry and I just started writing the song, and we had like the first verse and maybe some of the chorus, and then we went back and started working on my album, on the Heart Shaped Like Texas album. I flew to Texas, and a couple of days later, I get a call, and he said, "Man, we got the song finished," and he had called a friend of his Jimmy Carr, a guy that Jerry knew from Louisiana, and he was up writing in Nashville, and Jimmy, I ended up talking to Jimmy a year or two later after that, and he said Jerry had called him, said, "Man, me and Sammy started writing this song," and he said, "Can you come over here and let me play you what we started?" And so he went over there, and Jimmy had gotten it. He started going back out to Hendersonville, Tennessee, where he was living, and he said he was driving, and he said all of a sudden, man, the Lord just started giving him these words to the song, and he had to pull over and write down the words of the song before he could get back out to his place so he wouldn't forget it. And that's how that song come about.
You are so candid. I mean, you've written a book about it. You talk about it. People want to pick your brain about it. I'm picking your brain about it. And you stand up today in this church and you give your testimony about that night in 1989. How emotional at this stage of the game? I mean, here we are, 24 years removed from that night. How emotional do you still get about that moment of reckoning?
Well, obviously I've gotten PTSD, and I didn't know that PTSD, I didn't even know what it was, anything about it. I thought it was for people that went to war and,
right,
all this other kind of stuff. But it's anybody that's had trauma, that's been traumatized in their life. You've got some kind of PTSD from it. So that is, I live with that, and I'm probably not the easiest guy to live with, and I'm probably, hard to live with. But like you asked me a while ago, I mean, it's changed my life in so many ways, some for the good and some for the bad. I'm not as trusting as I used to be. It's hard for me to trust people because of everything that I've been through. But I'm thankful that God come into my life and he saved me. And, I get emotional about it. I still get emotional when I have to go around and talk about it sometimes because it hurts me, because of the way the police treated me. The way that I've never gotten an opportunity to talk to Kevin Hughes' family. The police would not let us talk to them or have any kind of communication with them, and I don't understand that. That still bothers me today, because if they made Kevin Hughes' family think that I had any kind of dealings with something like this to get him lured in there, because that's the way they treated me. They even said that to me, and it breaks my heart today to know that.
Do you feel like you, at this stage of the game, you've been vindicated?
They've never apologized to me. The police will never apologize to me. I don't think they ever will. And it's just not right. I mean, I took a lie detector test. They took me to Vanderbilt, had me hypnotized. I've done everything that I could do. And even being hypnotized, I did, my story never changed. I told them everything that I knew. The only thing that was different, when they had me hypnotized, a guy had on a heavy jacket. You
are fully cleared, though, from this particular, from having any kind of involvement whatsoever in this thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous to think, that I carry 100 staples down my arm, a bullet in my shoulder. To think that
you'd take a bullet.
It doesn't. What did I get out of it? What did I achieve? Nothing. And for you to think that, or you to say that about me, shame on you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, where's the logic in that?
Yeah.
Who is going to put themselves at risk to be involved and to be? I mean, what's the game?
It makes no sense.
You're exactly right. It defies logic to think that you would somehow put yourself in the line of fire. For what gain?
Yeah,
none. I mean, there's no upside for this whatsoever. So I'm glad that you weren't railroaded more than you were railroaded.
Well, Tony, I'm going to tell you, man. I mean, the police told me that whenever whoever shot Kevin and I, whenever that happened, Kevin Hughes' family would be the first to know. I'd be the second. That didn't happen. They didn't call me. Dolly Parton's hairdresser called me and said, "Hey, congratulations." I said, "Congratulations about what?" She said, "You don't know?" I said, "No, what?" She said, "They caught the guy that shot you." I immediately called them and said, "Hey, I heard that you guys caught the person that shot us." They said, "Yeah, they were out in Las Vegas. I believe it's where it was, extraditing him back to Nashville." And they said, "Yeah, we did, but he told us this about you." And I said, "What?" I said, "I don't care what he told you about me." I said, "I've told you everything I knew." Something inside me right then said, "You need to get an attorney." I immediately called my attorney, and he said, "Don't say another word." And I never said another word. Well, the trial came. And when the trial came, I had to go to Nashville. I just had gallbladder surgery a week prior to this, whenever they said and made the call that the trial was coming. I said, "I don't know if I can make it because I just had surgery." They said, "Well, there's not going to be a trial if Sammy Sadler's not here." I come to Nashville. I had to fly into Nashville the night before the trial. They put me up at the DoubleTree Hotel in Nashville. Ralph, my attorney, Ralph Gordon, picked me up. We had to go over to the DA's office at 9:30, 10 o'clock that night and meet with them prior to this. And we got through. We got in Ralph's car, and Ralph said, "Sammy," he said, "they're going to try to sandbag you." And I said, "You got to be kidding me, Ralph. What are you talking about?" I said, "I've told them everything I know." He said, "I'm just telling you, they're going to try to sandbag you." Well, the next day was the trial. And we went in, and here's all this media, all these people. I mean, Ralph took me down the long hall down there and took me and my parents all the way down to the end of the hall. And he said, "You guys stay right here." And it felt like he was gone 30 minutes. I don't know where he went. I don't know what happened. He said when he come back, he said, "When they call you in there to testify, you go in there and testify." And so I did. And when I got through, they rushed me out, took me back to the DoubleTree Hotel. They kept me sequestered there for 3 days.
Wow.
I couldn't watch the news. I couldn't talk to anybody about the trial. After the third day, they called and said, "You're free to go," and that was the end of it.
That was it. And this is all detailed in the book.
It's all detailed in my book. But to say what I'm trying to say here is that God made the way because he knew that I told the truth. And he knows the truth. And when you got God on your side, nobody can stop you.
As the Bible says, the truth shall set you
Absolutely.
Free. And indeed, you're a free man. And and now you're getting a chance to connect with that audience that you never really had a chance to fully cultivate in 1989. You're going out on a tour next year, as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact, you got a guy that, and I think he's going to sneak in right behind you here. You got a guy that you're going to be taking on tour with you.
Yes, sir.
This guy right here, Leon Everett, who picked up, 10 straight, 9 straight?
He had 11
straight. 11 straight top 10 records back in the early 80s. And so next year, 2024, audiences all over this country are going to get a chance to hear about both of your lives in the Music City. Leon Everett with us. I hope you don't mind me having him jump in here. But
this guy right here is a blessing, man. God brings people together, and I believe he brought us together.
I do too. And you brought up something today. I'm from Saluda County, South Carolina.
Yes.
You brought something, I didn't even know this. And he's from Bonham, Texas.
That's right, which is a town.
And by the way, I didn't know, Sammy, my career, I left Nashville, I left RCA in 1985. And that's about when he was coming in.
Yeah, you guys basically passed. You were going out the door when he was coming in the door in Nashville.
I had 11 straight. I had 11 straight top 10s and 3 number 1 records and all that good stuff. But anyway, I was going out. He was coming in. I did not know Sammy Sadler. And other than, on the news and, of course, on TV, Unsolved Mysteries on television, all this.
We all watched it, of course.
All this was on Unsolved Mysteries on TV and all. But I didn't know him personally. And, I left Nashville, and I was gone, 34 years.
Right. And you had your own dark adventures in Nashville.
Did,
I tell you what,
and we're going to go on this tour. We're going to tell a lot of this stuff, too.
Would you come on my podcast next week and talk a little about Leon Everett?
I just wondered when you was going to ask me, Tony.
Well, you got it, brother. You're going to know it.
All right, so we're sitting over there while y'all been doing this interview, jumping up and down. Hey, Tony, hey.
Well, okay.
Well, thank you. And now you've asked me on TV now, so I'm going to be on it.
It's official. Next week, we're talking with Sammy Sadler. This week, we're talking with Leon Everett. Next week on the podcast. But you guys are touring together next year.
Yeah, well, I was telling you, I hadn't been to CMA Fest in all these years. I was invited to come back to CMA Fest. And, I was blackballed from the Opry and all.
You were a pariah in Nashville.
I was.
There's no question about it. And if we're honest with each other, I know enough about you.
Yeah,
it was a little of your own making.
A lot of it was.
And that's what I'm saying.
I had a drinking problem.
But you had your moment of redemption where you had the opportunity to go back to Nashville.
I did.
And look at what God's done.
I was blackballed from the Opry. I went back doing CMA Fest. They've opened the Opry back to me, and they're trying to get me a date back on the Opry. They've opened it up. I can go in and out of the Opry when I want to.
But next year, these two characters are going to be on the road together.
And during CMA Fest, this is how this thing all started. Then during CMA Fest, they had a Country for a Cause. John Snyder, John Conley, T.G. Shepard, T. Graham Brown. I mean, there was a ton of us. There was 27 artists, in other words. And I was invited to be on that show.
Beautiful.
After all of these years and reunite with some of my old friends. And so we did. Well, right after that, about, a couple of weeks or whatever, I get a call from a guy named Sammy Sadler. I said, oh, that's the dude that's on Unsolved Mysteries, man. What do you want with me?
You'd like to be remembered for a little bit more than that, wouldn't you, Sammy?
Exactly. But anyway, we got to talking back and forth, and he was telling me he's going out on a tour, going to put a tour together in 2024, and he knew all about my past. And, I was blackballed in Nashville. I got a story, too. He said, man, our stories together, we could let people really know how Nashville really is behind the scenes. All they see is the glitz and the glory, but how Nashville really works. He said, we could go out, you do your hit songs, I can do songs, we'll talk, tell them about the audience, about Nashville, how it really works. And I said, man, yeah, that'd be great. And then tell them how the Lord brought us through it all. Him. He wouldn't be, that just like that song said, wasn't you, Lord, he wouldn't be here. Yeah. And if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be here. We're both was on our deathbed, so to speak, and going to hell, so to speak, if you want the truth out of it. And that's where I was at.
Well, I got to say,
God just turned us both around, and now we've got the opportunity to go out and tell the story. But what I was going to tell you about, it was a God thing. We got confirmed today, and you confirmed it, Tony. And I know God was a messenger through you because you asked him when he was eating dinner, you asked him where he was from. He said, Bonham, Texas. And you said, hey, that's where James...
Hero of the James...
From
James,
the Alamo,
yeah.
James Bonham. I'm from Saluda County, South Carolina, and that's where James Bonham is from. I did not know that. See, I'm South Carolina. I did not even know that. The James Bonham is from South Carolina, and he was a hero at the Alamo, and they named the town in Texas Bonham, Texas. Now, is that strange?
No,
he is from Bonham,
that's a God thing.
That's a God thing.
It ain't strange, it's a God thing.
He's from Bonham, Texas, and I'm from Saluda County. So God, through you today, God used you as a messenger. I did not know this. Yeah. Until today, I did not know. He lives in Bonham. He didn't know where the town, how they got the name. So that is confirmation right there that we are doing what God wants us to do, and we're in God's will. And there is no telling, when God's behind it, how this tour might take off. We might not have the hit records on the radio today and all this kind of stuff, but you know what? You don't need it. When God's in charge, they'll be knocking on our doors wanting us to come to Nashville.
But again, I'm sitting right here across from two very talented individuals. One I've known all my life because I grew up admiring my cousin, and a guy that I just met today that I admire so much for just your authenticity. And so, it's a blessing to have both of you here on the Southern Chord podcast. And Sammy, I want to do one little parting thing with you here real quick. You got the 1989 album. You've got the book, A Hit with a Bullet. And you've got this tour coming up. And you had the opportunity actually to talk directly to somebody who was in this church today about never giving up hope, never giving up, never letting go. And just as a parting thought, I want you to speak to our listeners from a guy who has been at death's door, who has seen your life's desire cut short, and now you get a chance to go back out and recapture that. Parting message. It's all yours. It's your stage. Talk to anybody that might be listening that needs a word of hope from Sammy Sadler.
Well, not only me, Leon's got a powerful, powerful story, and people's going to know that. They're going to hear it
next week on the podcast.
And they need to hear it because, he's told me things over this weekend that has just blown my mind. He's a walking miracle as well. He's here for a purpose as well. And I don't know what people are going through out there. Nobody knows what somebody's walking through, what they're facing. Mine was a bullet. Leon's was alcohol. God has had his hands on us. And as I look back over my life, and I'm sure Leon can say the same thing, God has been carrying us. And he's had his hand on us even when we didn't know it. Even when you don't know it, God is there with you. And all you got to do is look up to him, call on his name, and believe, and he will bring you through the fire.
Amazing. Sammy Sadler and our special jumping in from the sidelines guest, Leon Everett, who will be on the podcast next week. Thank you, guys.
Is that a promise?
No, that's a guarantee.
Y'all hear it out
As a
there
matter of fact, we're going to tape it at the Tool Shed up in Saluda County.
Yeah.
All right, not too far from the birthplace of Bonham.
Studio, the Tool Shed.
That's right, not too far from the birthplace of Bonham. But anyway, it's such a blessing to have Sammy Sadler and Leon Everett here, and I thank you both for this. And again, please share this podcast with your friends, and because it's got a lot of good stuff in it. It's got more so than I even anticipated. A lot of beautiful stuff in this particular podcast, and I appreciate it. And if you would like to be a friend of the podcast and you'd like to support my gas money to get out and tell these stories, we do have a Friends of the Podcast link on our website that you can support it. For Leon Everett, Sammy Sadler, I'm Tony Ballman. Thank you so much for listening to this edition and watching this edition of the Southern Chord, Conversations from the Soundtrack of the South. I'll see you next week with Cousin Leon.